thanks a lot. So I will report from a project that I'm doing together with Anja and John and Alexander. And it is on social preferences and on how education shapes social preferences. So the basic motivation is that we know most of you have done research on social preferences, and we know that social preferences seem to be very important in explaining charitable giving, market behavior, political institutions, development, even growth. So, I think it's quite clear that social preferences matter. But the question we don't know that much about is what exactly shapes social preferences? And the problem here is that we have a lack of causal evidence. And it's really hard to get at it. Of course, this is extremely important for policymakers, because if it's the case that policies are shaping the social preferences or preferences in general, that is something we need to take into account when we are designing policies. And in some sense, we are far away from this optimality idea in economics, where we take preferences for given and then try to find the best policy given these preferences. If the policy itself actually influences the preferences, we are in much more difficult terrain. So that's the basic motivation. More specifically, we wanted to look at education. So, education is a huge part of our society, an extremely important public policy. And typically, I think all over the world, the main question is how can we design educational policies that improve academic performance? But clearly, if it's the case that these policies not only shape academic performance and your cognitive skills, but also shape, for example, social preferences, that is something we need to better understand and need to take into account. So that is what we wanted to discuss. And here we could rely on the ongoing study here in Chicago, where they randomly allocate children, as you know, the John List and Levitt and Fryer study, where they randomly allocate children into education and, importantly, also into different types of education. So we exploit this possibility, and we have, in our study, we used the first wave of children, 427 children. They were randomly assigned to something control, so they didn't get anything. So this was when they were 3 to 4 years old. And then some people were randomly allocated into having a preschool. So that was a full-time preschool when they were 3 to 4 years old. And then others were randomly allocated into what's called a parent academy, which meant that bi-monthly the parents were taught how they should teach their kids academic skills. And then they went back home, hopefully, and actually did that with the kids. And in the Parent Academy, there was also incentives for the parents. So if the kids performed better, the parents would be paid. So there are two really important things about this. So one important thing is that we really here have a random allocation of education at young age. And it's enormously important to understand, does that matter for the social preferences that these kids later have in life? And also very importantly, we see that we have two very different policies. So one policy is that you really try to get the kid to come to school, be with other kids, learn in school, while the other policy is to really try to get the parent to teach the kid, to incentivize the parent. So these are very different policies, and it's of course very important to understand which is better for academic performance. But for our study, we also say, well, this is also, it's also extremely important to understand, will these experiences affect or shape the social preferences of the children? So the basic structure of this study is very simple. We invited all the children who had been part of the first wave. So they are no longer in this program. They are done with the program. That program was for 2 years. They are now in regular school up to second grade. And basically, we invited all of them, and they took part in experiments where we tested the social preferences. And we then wanted to see whether the children who had been part of one of the programs did differently or acted differently than the children who were in the control. So the idea is very simple, but what's really powerful is that this really will give us causal evidence for whether education in general and specific types of education is shaping social preferences. So, of course, there are many things you can look at when you study social preferences. And what we do, and this is, of course, building on our own research, we focus on the fairness part of social preferences. So what we designed was experiments that was, the idea was to test two different things. One thing was to what extent do people care about fairness? Do the children care about fairness? What we call the fairness weight. And here we wanted to look at this in two different cases. In one case where your self-interest is at stake, the standard dictator game. But then also in another case where the child had to make a trade-off between fairness and efficiency. So these were, I mean, how much weight will the children put on fairness in these cases? And then secondly, we wanted to look at whether the education had shaped their idea of what is a fair inequality. So we wanted to see how the children considered cases where an inequality was due to merit, one guy had performed better than the other, or was due to pure luck. And we wanted to see whether the education again had shaped these ideas of what is a fair inequality and what's an unfair inequality, which we have been doing a lot of work on, and we think is really important for understanding both behavior and political differences and so on. So what we did was we played 4 different types of experiments. So to look at the fairness weight, I mean the importance you attach to fairness, we really wanted to have situations where there were no doubt what was fair. So we really wanted to have what is fair is clear. I mean, no doubt about that. So first we did a standard dictator game with one twist. So the standard dictator game was, before they played the dictator game, they had to work for a short time. So all the children had to work, both the dictator and the recipient. And the point of that was, and they all, I mean, they just did some regular work. They put the same amount of time into it. And the point was that basically the money that the dictator received and was to split was payment for this work. So it was clear that both had done the same work, same amount of time. So it should be quite clear that, I mean, an equal split would be the fair thing. But they had to split 10 coins, and these coins were valuable because afterwards they could buy pencils or small gifts and so on with the coins. So that was the stakeholder decision. The idea was, I mean, how did they trade off fairness and selfishness? The second one was, we wanted to see how did they trade off efficiency and fairness. And here they acted as spectator. That means there was no self-interest involved because they were making a choice for 2 others. So here they were dividing stickers for 2 others, 2 other children, and there were absolutely no differences. They were just informed, there are 2 other children who are also part of this program, but they were totally outside of this present experiment. And you can, we have some stickers we want to send to them. We can send 2 to each of them, or we can send 1 to one of them and 6 to the other. Again, our idea, the premise of our study is that, I mean, it's clearly the fair thing is to send the same amount to both of them. They have no information indicating that anything else would be, that they should differentiate between them. But of course, the efficient thing is to send 6 to one and 1 to the other. I mean, that gives, then you can send out 7. So we wanted to see how they traded off fairness and efficiency. And now, to understand the fairness view, they also made 2 spectator decisions. And these were decisions where, for the merit, they had also 10 stickers. And they were told that there were 2 people, 2 other children who had performed on a task, a memory task. And one had done really well, and the other had not done that well. So initially, we had allocated 8 to the one who did well, and 2 to the one who did not well. And I mean, the inequality here is due to, in some sense, merit. And they have to decide, do they want to change this or not? They knew that these other kids, they knew that this could be changed. So they were in some sense in position to change it. They could equalize, they can do whatever they want. So this is within. This is within. This is within. So we pay them with coins here in the stakeholder design. In the spectator designs, we don't pay them. So we can discuss it more. So basically, we have done a lot of spectator design. And some people say, well, the spectator design is not incentivized. Clearly, it is incentivized because you make a real choice. So it's not incentivized on the selfish margin, but if you care about, fairness, it will be incentivized on the fairness margin. And we have shown that, typically you will get very similar results. But anyway, we did it in the spectator design. Let's discuss more if you would like. But anyway, they were told this, and they had to decide. They knew these were real people. So they knew, these are two other children, and you determine how much they are paid. And finally, they were told that there was also another case where two people had been working. But this case, we had just decided how much to pay each of them by pure luck, by a random choice. And in one, the lucky guy got 10, the other got 0, and they could now decide whether they wanted to do something about that. So again, we wanted to see how they responded to an inequality due to luck and an inequality due to merit. This is the experimental setup. Anja implemented it, so she should give you all the details. I think it worked out very nicely, but of course there are many issues to discuss. This is not anonymous the way we typically do it, but the procedures were, very well implemented. And we can talk more about that afterwards if you would like to.
Did the spectators see the children?
No, so the spectators did not see the children they were deciding for. Absolutely not. Okay, so just briefly, since we don't have much time, this is a summary of the decisions before we go into looking at whether there are treatment effects. So here you see in the dictator game, well, you see it's very similar to a standard distribution. A lot of people split equally. Some people don't give anything to the other person, but it looks exactly like something you should expect. And very nicely, you see that very few people seem confused. Very few people, give more to the other, which we typically would think of as maybe confused. Efficiency decision, yeah, roughly confused. There are cases where that can be, of course, justified, but I think this at least showed that they understood the task. That was my point. Here you see how they were split between 2-2 and 1-6. Actually, you see that 60% went for the efficient allocation. Here you see how they divided between the person who did well and the one who did not well. You see that actually 30% they decided to equalize. So they gave the same to both. More than 30% kept it the way we had done it initially. And you see there is a distribution in between. Again, you see very few people giving more to the one who performed worse, which would have seemed maybe as potentially reflecting confusion, even though, of course, you can come up with arguments. And here you see for the luck, so you see again almost 40% equalized. You see close to 20% kept it the way it was. So this is just an overview of the general decisions. So here we have the treatment, the decisions by treatment. And what you see first is that there's very little going on when it comes to selfishness. When they make this trade-off between fairness and narrow selfish concerns, very minor changes. But you see that there is actually a big change quite a substantial change in how they think about efficiency, where the children who had been part of the parent academy to a much greater extent went for the efficient solutions. I'm a little bit fast now, so I forgot to say something. Here I focus only on those who divided equally. So I'm just reporting here. We will get the results whatever way we do it. It doesn't depend on this. But this is just reporting this share who divided equally in each of these cases. So I forgot that. Okay? So this is not looking at all decisions, but the share who divided equally. So we see that the share who divided equally was more or less the same in the selfish. We see it goes significantly down for the parent academy kids, which means that they go more for the efficient solution than the other kids. And what you see here is that for the preschool kids, you see that they, to a greater extent, share equally in the merit treatment and in the luck treatment. And if you now look at share given, I'm sorry for rushing it. If you look at share given, you will see exactly the same picture. So this is just to make it simple. Okay? So if you just summarize here, so we can make an index for each of these two things, basically an index for giving you the value of 1 if you shared equally in the selfish game and in the efficiency game, and just take the average of that. And similarly, an index of whether how you dealt with the two fairness view games. 1 if you shared equally, 0 if not, and just take the average of that. And what you basically see, what we take from this, is that you see that the Parent Academy program seems to make people less concerned with fairness, while the preschool program clearly make the kids much more likely to share equally in the settings involving merit and luck. So they have very different views. One seems to impact the fairness weight, the other the fairness view. And and basically, if we run regressions, this comes out. If we look at the fairness weight index, you see that that's significant for the Parent Academy. The other one is significant for the fairness view. And now here we control for experimental fixed effects and things like that. But basically, the picture becomes exactly the same. So our initial, I mean, we are in the writing of this paper, so any comments are most welcome. But basically, what we take from this is that we show causal evidence of education intervention actually shaping social preferences. We can, of course, discuss are these big effects or small effects, but clearly there is an effect of the educational intervention, and it matters which one you implement. So you see that the preschool shapes the fairness view of the kids. I mean, if you're in school with the kids, day out and day in, you play more the egalitarian, more the equal sharing rule than if you're not been there. And this is up to 2 years after they ended the program. So these kids have been out of the program for almost 2 years. So I think it's quite an amazing effect. For the Parent Academy, we see that this shapes the weight, the importance the kids assign to fairness. We find this, as you see, particularly in the, or I should even say only significantly in the trade-off with efficiency. In the dictator game, we don't see it. I mean, the point estimate is the same, goes in the same direction, but it's not significant. So overall, I mean, 2 contributions. One is causal evidence showing that education shapes social preferences. And secondly, that which type of educational intervention you go for will also be extremely important, and in our case works in opposite directions. So thanks. Say it again.
Would you consider changing the time when you get what you pay for?
Maybe.
For efficiency.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Have you looked at characteristics of the parents in interaction with the treatment effects?
So we have not looked at it, and now I have to turn to Anja, because can we look at it?
I think so. Yes. So we have lots of data on parents. We know their age, we know their educational attainment, their self-worthiness. And we know race and gender. We've looked at race and gender.
We have looked at a little bit. But of course, it's not a huge sample we have. I mean, since you start cutting it, I mean, yeah, it's not a huge sample. But I mean, clearly this is interesting, so we should definitely look more at it, yeah.
I actually have a question about the randomization into the different academies.
So then you can look at Anja again.
So the randomization happens, and then what kind of drop-off do you get out of people that were randomized into a thing and then were not happy with what they got randomized into? So did they recommit to absolutely not do anything else? So like the control kids, this is all did they end up in a preschool somewhere else? This is all intensive treatment.
Yeah, and we are really, I mean, I didn't show you the balance, but the balance is really nice, I mean, on baseline characteristics. So
it's quite nice the way we do it because all of these kids enter into the preschool program, and when you pick them up at the 2nd grade, they're actually in our school district, and we assess them in class. And so it's not
Can we take one or two more questions, maybe? Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on the first question. How do the effects of parents interact with the treatments? I think we recognize that we blocked on parent characteristics, so they shouldn't really have, we shouldn't see different effects using parents that should already be there. No, that's better.
Could be interaction, but anyway, yeah. Exactly. Could be interaction effects. Yeah?
So I'm just wondering whether in the syllabus for the Parent Academy you would have been putting kind of a certain point where you're just pushing for equality, so therefore the parents are then conveying to the kids how.
So in the Parent Academy, so basically you're asking about the mechanism, and what is the mechanism driving it? So actually I think they have, I don't know the details of this, but for example, for the Parent Academy, I have the understanding that they've asked the siblings. Maybe there was a spillover effect to the siblings positively. The parents are taught how to teach the kid, and maybe they don't only teach this kid, but also the other kids. But actually the siblings seem to report the opposite, that they get less attention.
I think it's too early to tell.
Say it again, Jan?
I think it's fair to say it's too early to tell.
No, it's too early to tell, but just to give you an idea what kind of mechanism could be at play. If you see this, focus on one kid, you understand, this kid, it's important that this kid performs, we also pay for it. That could be the kind of thinking that led them to care more for efficiency. But totally, John knows much more and Anja about this, but yeah, we should definitely think more about the underlying mechanism.